In 1939, the United States Army ranked 17th in the world, smaller than Romania's, smaller than Portugal's. They had more horses than tanks, and most of their soldiers had never fired a weapon in combat. 4 years later, that same country was simultaneously fighting on 3 different continents, supplying weapons to every major ally, and pushing 2 of history's most dangerous military machines, Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan, into total collapse at the same time. How does that happen? How does a country go from military irrelevance to the most powerful fighting force on the planet in just 4 years? Today we're going to break that down, because the real answer is not what most people think. Most people, when they answer this question, immediately jump to one word: production. And they're not wrong, because the numbers are genuinely insane. Between 1941 and 1945, American factories produced roughly 300,000 aircraft. And that's not a typo. 300,000 planes. They built 88,000 tanks, 2.4 million trucks, and enough ammunition to fill entire cities. At its peak, an American shipyard was launching a new ship every single day. Henry Kaiser's yards built a Liberty cargo ship from raw steel to fully operational vessel in an average of 42 days. One of them did it in 4.5 days, as a bet. But here's the thing that gets glossed over. Raw production alone doesn't win wars. Germany had excellent production numbers too. Japan was building capable warships and aircraft well into 1944. The Soviet Union was matching American steel output by 1943. So if everyone is building stuff, why did America's stuff matter so much more? The answer starts with geography and timing. But it ends with something much more interesting. A totally different philosophy of warfare that no other major power had developed. At the height of production, one American B-24 bomber rolled off the Willow Run assembly line in Michigan every single hour. One plane every 60 minutes, around the clock, 7 days a week. The workers who built them, many of them women who had never worked in a factory before, were producing aircraft faster than Germany could shoot them down. That is not a military advantage. That is a logistical stranglehold. Now, here's where the real argument starts. Because if you only talk about factories, you're missing the most important part of this story. By 1942, the U.S. Army had made a fundamental strategic decision that most other armies had not fully committed to. They called it combined arms warfare. And at its core, it was simple. You never send one type of weapon to do a job that 5 types of weapons could do together. Infantry, tanks, artillery, air support, and engineers. All coordinated, all communicating, all moving as one organism. This sounds obvious now. It wasn't obvious then. The Germans had pioneered the concept with their Blitzkrieg doctrine in 1939 and 1940. But their version was heavily dependent on speed and surprise. When those 2 advantages disappeared, when they ran into the vast distances of the Soviet Union or the dug-in defenses of Normandy, their system started breaking down. The Japanese never fully committed to it. The British were getting there, but were held back by rigid command structures. The Americans didn't just adopt combined arms, they industrialized it. They built it into their training manuals, their officer schools, their radio communications, and their supply chains from the very beginning. By the time American units were fighting in North Africa in 1942 and early 1943, they were admittedly raw and made serious mistakes. But they were learning faster than anyone. The Battle of Le Maine, the disaster at Kasserine Pass, the grinding campaign in Sicily, these weren't failures. They were tuition payments on the most expensive and effective military education in history. In February 1943, German General Erwin Rommel, arguably the most tactically gifted commander of the entire war, routed American forces at Kasserine Pass in Tunisia. He described American soldiers as poorly led, poorly coordinated, and likely to fold under pressure. 6 months later, those same American forces, now under new leadership, were pushing Rommel's veterans out of North Africa entirely and preparing to invade Europe. 6 months. That turnaround is one of the most remarkable things in military history, and it only happened because the American system was designed to learn from failure. Now, we need to talk about the individual soldier, because this is where the American military did something truly unconventional for its time. Most armies in World War II operated on a strict top-down command structure. Officers gave orders, sergeants passed those orders down, privates executed them. If a lieutenant was killed in battle, his unit often stopped functioning until a replacement arrived. The whole system depended on orders flowing from the top. The U.S. Army, particularly after 1942, deliberately trained against that model. They invested heavily in their non-commissioned officers, their sergeants, and insisted that every soldier understand not just what they were supposed to do, but why. The concept was simple. If the officer goes down, the sergeant takes over. If the sergeant goes down, the corporal takes over. If everyone above you is dead, you still know the objective, and you still push forward. This philosophy, called mission command in modern military doctrine, meant that American units were far more adaptable than their opponents. A German infantry platoon that lost its officer often froze or retreated. An American platoon in the same situation would reorganize and keep moving. You can see this play out across the entire European and Pacific theaters. At Point du Hoc, on D-Day, Ranger units scaled 100-feet cliffs under fire, took catastrophic casualties, and still completed their mission because every single man knew what the mission was. That is not just bravery, that is training. Staff Sergeant Audie Murphy was drafted at 18 years old from rural Texas. He weighed barely 112 pounds when he enlisted, and was initially rejected by the Marines and the paratroopers for being too small. The Army took him. By the end of the war, he was the most decorated American combat soldier in history, credited with holding off an entire German infantry company almost single-handedly, while wounded, directing artillery strikes on his own position, and inspiring the men around him to counterattack. Murphy's story is extreme, but the qualities that made him effective, initiative, adaptability, refusal to stop, were qualities the American training system specifically tried to build in every soldier. So what was it? What actually made the U.S. armies so hard to defeat? It wasn't just the factories, though. The factories were extraordinary. It wasn't just the doctrine, though combined arms warfare was a genuine force multiplier. It wasn't just the individual soldiers, though American troops showed remarkable resilience and adaptability throughout the war. The real answer is that the United States built a system, an interconnected machine where industrial production fed the doctrine shaped the training produced the soldiers, and the soldiers generated lessons that looped back into the doctrine. Every piece reinforced every other piece. When one part failed, the other parts compensated. When the system learned something in North Africa, in the Pacific, in Italy, that lesson spread across the entire force within months. Germany had better individual weapons in many categories. Japan had more experienced naval aviators at the start of the war, but neither of them had a system capable of scaling up, learning on the fly, and absorbing punishment the way the American military could. You could defeat an American unit in battle. You could not defeat the process that immediately analyzed that defeat, fixed the problem, and sent a better equipped, better trained force back at you. That is why they were so hard to beat. If you want to go deeper on any one of these threads, the industrial side, the doctrine, or the individual soldiers, drop it in the comments and we'll make that video. And if you're new here and you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the notification bell. See you in the next video.